Daughter says, "Dad, why did you abandon us?" to the millionaire at the airport, leaving him instantly in shock. The morning sun filtered through the huge windows of Jack Thompson's penthouse, illuminating a space that screamed luxury and loneliness in equal parts. At 40, Jack had it all: considerable fortune, a constantly growing company, and a lifestyle that many would envy. However, as he adjusted his tie in front of the mirror, his eyes revealed an emptiness that no amount of money could fill. He sighed deeply, picking up his Italian leather briefcase. Today was a day like any other: meetings, multi-million-dollar decisions, and the constant pressure of maintaining his empire. But something inside told him that this day would be different. As the private elevator took him to the ground floor of his luxury building, Jack couldn't help but think of the faces that haunted his dreams. Emily, his ex-wife, with her eyes full of disappointment. Ethan, his son, who would now be 12 years old, and whose last image in his mind was that of a 6-year-old crying. And Lily, his little princess, who was barely 4 years old when he left. 6 long years since he made the decision that would change the course of their lives. Back then, convinced he was doing the right thing, he chose his ambition over his family. Now, surrounded by luxury but empty inside, he wondered if he could ever repair the damage caused. The chauffeur was waiting outside the building, ready to take him to the airport. Jack had a business trip to Miami scheduled, another routine in his busy life as an international businessman. However, as the car glided through the city streets, a feeling of unease took hold of him. "Everything all right, Mr. Thompson?" asked the chauffeur, noticing his boss's worried expression in the rearview mirror. Jack forced a smile. "Yes, Mike, just another busy day." But it wasn't just another day, it was the anniversary of his departure. 6 years ago, on this very day, he had taken his suitcases and walked out the door of his house, leaving behind tears, screams, and broken hearts. Upon arriving at the airport, Jack moved mechanically through security checks. His mind was elsewhere, replaying scenes from the past like a looping movie. He remembered the last argument with Emily, his hurtful words, the way she looked at him with a mixture of pain and contempt. "Your children need you, Jack," Emily had shouted. "We need you." "I'm doing this for you," he had responded, blinded by his ambition. "Someday you'll understand that all of this is to give you the life you deserve." How wrong he was. Now, 6 years later, he realized that the only thing his children needed was his presence, his love, his time. Things that no amount of money could buy. As he walked through the terminal, dragging his designer suitcase, Jack felt like an automaton. The flight announcements, the bustle of travelers, everything seemed like background noise compared to the tumult of his thoughts. That's when it happened. Among the crowd, as if fate had decided to play a cruel joke on him, Jack saw a familiar face. His heart stopped for a moment. It was Emily. There she was, as beautiful as he remembered her. Perhaps even more so, time had been kind to her, and the years had only added a maturity to her beauty that made her even more attractive. But she wasn't alone. By her side, holding her hand, was Lily. His little girl was no longer so little. At 10 years old, she was the spitting image of her mother, with the same wavy brown hair and vivacious eyes that Jack remembered. And there, a little further back, was Ethan. Jack's heart skipped a beat. His son, now a preteen, had a serious expression that didn't correspond to a child his age. Jack could see traits of himself in him, the same strong jaw, the same bearing. But there was something in his eyes, a hardness that made Jack shudder. For a moment, Jack was paralyzed. Should he approach? What would he say? How would they react? 1,000 questions bombarded his mind in a matter of seconds. Before he could make a decision, Lily saw him. Her eyes widened, a mixture of recognition and confusion on her face. "Dad?" Her voice, barely a whisper, cut through the airport noise like a knife. Emily turned sharply, her eyes meeting Jack's. For a moment, time seemed to stop. All the activity at the airport faded away, and there were only them, connected by a gaze loaded. With contradictory emotions, Jack took a step forward, his mouth opening to say something, anything. But before he could make a sound, a male figure appeared next to Emily. He was tall, handsome, with a presence that exuded confidence and protection. Without even knowing him, Jack immediately knew who he was: Ryan, Emily's new partner. The tension in the air was palpable. Ryan, sensing the discomfort, placed a protective hand on Emily's shoulder. That simple gesture was like a stab for Jack. It was a living reminder of everything he had lost, of the life he had left behind. Jack. Emily's voice broke the silence, cold and controlled. What a surprise. Jack swallowed hard, trying to find the right words. "Emily, I didn't expect to see you here." Lily, oblivious to the tension between the adults, took a step forward. "Dad, why did you abandon us?" The innocence and pain in her voice were like a dagger to Jack's heart. Ethan, for his part, remained silent, but his gaze was eloquent. A mixture of pain, anger, and resentment burned in his eyes, making Jack feel even smaller. Ryan, sensing the discomfort of the situation, intervened. "Perhaps this isn't the best place for this conversation," he said, his voice firm but not aggressive. Jack felt a wave of jealousy and anger. Who was this man to intervene in a conversation with his family? The irrationality of his thought didn't escape his own understanding, but emotions were taking control. "You're right," Jack responded, his voice tinged with barely contained sarcasm. "It's not the place. But tell me, what would be the appropriate place? Your house? The one you share with my family?" Emily's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Jack, don't do this. Not here, not now." But Jack wasn't listening anymore. Years of guilt, regret, and loneliness were bubbling to the surface, manifesting as blind anger directed at the man who now occupied the place he had abandoned. "Do you think you can just show up and take my place?" Jack spat, taking a threatening step towards Ryan. Ryan, to his credit, kept his cool. "No one is taking anyone's place, Jack. We're just trying to live our lives." Those words, although spoken with pacifying intent, only served to further enrage Jack. In a fit of anger and frustration, he pushed Ryan, causing him to stumble backward. "Dad, no!" Lily cried, while Ethan stepped forward to position himself between his father and Ryan. The situation escalated quickly. Ryan, finally losing patience, responded to the push with a punch that landed on Jack's chest. "You abandoned them," Ryan shouted, his composure finally broken. "You have no right to show up like this and cause more pain." The fight attracted the attention of everyone in the terminal. People stopped to look. Some pulled out their phones to record, while others called security. Emily, horrified by the scene, shouted, "Enough! Stop, both of you!" But it was too late. Jack and Ryan were engaged in a fight in the middle of the airport, years of tension and resentment being released in an instant of uncontrolled violence. Ethan, with tears in his eyes, grabbed his sister and pulled her away from the scene. Lily cried inconsolably, calling for her father between sobs. Finally, airport security intervened, separating the two men. Jack, with his shirt torn and a cut on his lip, looked around, the reality of what he had just done hitting him hard. He saw the fear in Lily's eyes, the disappointment in Ethan's, and the disgust in Emily's. At that moment, he realized that far from reconnecting with his family, he had just dug an even deeper chasm between them. As security guards escorted him out of the area, Jack looked at his family one last time. Emily was hugging Lily, consoling her, while Ryan, with a bruised eye, put a protective hand on Ethan's shoulder. "I'm sorry," Jack mumbled, but his words were lost in the chaos of the moment. Hours later, sitting in the airport interrogation room, Jack reflected on the day's events, his flight to Miami, forgotten, his business plans insignificant in the face of the magnitude of what had just occurred. An officer entered the room. "Mr. Thompson, your lawyer is here." Jack nodded mechanically. He knew that with his money and influence, he would probably get out of this situation without major legal consequences, but the emotional consequences, those would be much harder to handle. As he waited for his lawyer, Jack couldn't help but think about how he had reached this point. How had the man who once had everything that really mattered become this emotional wreck, fighting in an airport like a teenager? Memories assaulted him, taking him back 6 years to the day that changed everything. 6 years earlier, Jack Thompson, 34, was at the pinnacle of his career. His tech startup had just received a multi-million-dollar buyout offer from one of the big Silicon Valley companies. It was every entrepreneur's dream come true. That night he arrived home later than usual, his heart racing with excitement and his mind full of possibilities. As he entered, he found Emily in the kitchen, preparing dinner. Ethan, 6 years old, was sitting at the kitchen table coloring enthusiastically, while Lily, 4, played with her dolls on the floor. "Dad!" Ethan shouted when he saw him, running to hug him. Lily, not wanting to be left behind, also got up to greet her father. Jack hugged them both, feeling like the luckiest man in the world. He had a beautiful family, and now, with this new deal, he could give them everything he had always dreamed of. "Emily, we need to talk," he said, unable to contain his excitement. "Something incredible has happened." Emily looked at him, a mixture of curiosity and concern in her eyes. She knew that look in Jack. She had seen it before when he had big news related to his work. After putting the children to bed, Jack and Emily sat in the living room. He told her about the offer, about how it would change their lives, about all the opportunities that would open up for them. "But there's one condition," Jack finally said. "We would have to move to California. The company wants me there to oversee the transition and then to lead a new division." The silence that followed was deafening. Emily looked at him, processing the information. "Jack," she began, carefully choosing her words, "that sounds incredible. But have you thought about what it would mean for the kids? For me? Our whole life is here. My job, Ethan's school, our friends, our family." Jack, in his enthusiasm, hadn't fully considered the impact this change would have on his family. In his mind, he only saw the opportunities, the bright future he could provide for them. "Emily, think about what we could give the kids with this money. The best education, trips around the world, financial security for life." But Emily wasn't convinced. "The kids don't need all that, Jack. They need stability. They need their father present. You already work too much here. What will it be like in California?" The discussion went on for hours. Jack, blinded by ambition and the belief that he was doing the best for his family, couldn't understand why Emily didn't share his enthusiasm. For him, this was the ticket to a better life, the opportunity to give his children everything he never had. "Don't you see?" Jack argued, frustrated. "I'm doing this for you, for our future." Emily looked at him sadly. "No, Jack, you're doing it for yourself, for your ego, for your ambition. We already have everything we need. Here." Emily's words hit Jack like a punch to the stomach. How could she not see that all his effort was for them? The following days were tense. Jack spent more and more time at the office, avoiding Emily's accusing looks and the children's innocent questions. He told himself it was because he had a lot of work to do before the big move, but deep down he knew he was running away. One night, almost 2 weeks after the initial offer, Jack arrived, home past midnight. He found Emily awake, waiting for him in the living room. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tired but determined. Jack nodded, knowing this moment was inevitable. "I've been thinking a lot," Emily began, "and I can't do it, Jack. I can't uproot the kids from their home, their school, their friends. I can't leave my job, my family, everything we've built here." Jack felt the world stop. "What are you saying, Emily?" "I'm saying that if you decide to accept that offer, if you decide to move to California, you'll have to do it alone." The words fell like a hammer between them. Jack looked at her, incredulous. "Are you giving me an ultimatum?" "No, Jack, I'm giving you a choice, your family or your ambition. You can't have both, not the way you're proposing it." Anger took hold of Jack. "How can you be so selfish? Don't you see I'm trying to give us a better life?" Emily stood up, tears in her eyes. "The only selfish one here is you, Jack. We already have a good life. We have love. We have health. We have everything we need. But that's not enough for you, is it? You always need more. You always need to prove something." The words became harsher, the accusations more bitter. Years of hidden resentments came to the surface. Emily accused Jack of putting his work above his family, of being absent even when physically present. Jack counterattacked. accusing Emily of not supporting his dreams, of not understanding the sacrifice necessary for success. At some point during the fight, Ethan appeared in the doorway of the living room, awakened by the shouting. His big, scared eyes looked at his parents, unable to understand why the two people he loved most in the world were yelling at each other like that. "Mom? Dad?" His small, trembling voice cut through the anger like a knife, causing both to stop short. Emily immediately went to Ethan, hugging him and trying to calm him down. Jack stood there paralyzed, watching his son cry in his mother's arms, scared by a fight he should never have witnessed. It was at that moment that Jack made his decision. With a heavy heart and a mind clouded by wounded pride and anger, he went upstairs and began packing a suitcase. When he came down, Emily was standing at the entrance, Ethan back in bed. She looked at him, a mixture of shock and resignation on her face. "Are you really going to do this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jack nodded, unable to look her in the eyes. "It's best for everyone," he said, although the words sounded hollow even to him. "Best for whom, Jack? For you." He didn't answer. Instead, he approached her, kissed her forehead, one last time, and walked out the door, leaving behind not only his home but also his heart. The days and weeks that followed were a blur for Jack. He immersed himself in work, in the move, in building his new empire in California. He told himself he was doing the right thing, that someday his family would understand and forgive him. But the phone calls with the children became increasingly difficult. Ethan, confused and hurt, became more distant. With each conversation, Lily, too young to really understand what was happening, cried and asked when Daddy would come home. Emily, for her part, remained cold and distant. Conversations were limited to practical matters, child support, visits, which Jack constantly postponed due to work, the children's health and education. As time passed, Jack realized that the success he had so longed for tasted like ashes in his mouth. He had everything. He thought he wanted money, power, recognition, but he had lost the only thing that really mattered. He tried to come back, of course. After a year, when the reality of his loss finally hit him with full force, he tried to repair the damage, but it was too late. Emily had moved on. The children had gotten used to a life without him, and the chasm he had created with his departure seemed unbridgeable. And so, the years passed. Jack built his empire, becoming one of the most successful businessmen in the country. But every night when he returned to his luxurious but empty apartment, he wondered if it had all been worth it. Back in the present, sitting in the cold interrogation room at the airport, Jack realized he had been reliving those moments over and over for the past 6 years. Every decision, every word spoken in anger, every lost opportunity to make things right, weighed on him like a slab. The encounter at the airport had been a slap of reality, seeing his children now so grown and changed, seeing Emily with another man, a man who seemed to be everything he wasn't. It was too much to handle. The door opened and his lawyer entered, a middle-aged man in an impeccable suit with an expression of professional efficiency. "Mr. Thompson," said the lawyer, sitting across from him, "I've spoken with airport security and the legal representatives of the other party. Given your position and lack of prior record, it's likely we can resolve this with a fine and perhaps some community service hours. However," the lawyer paused, looking at Jack with concern. "However what?" Jack asked, his voice hoarse. "Mrs. Emily Parker has mentioned the possibility of requesting a restraining order. Given the incident and the presence of minors, she has grounds to do so." The words hit Jack like a punch to the stomach. A restraining order. He wouldn't even be able to try to approach his children without violating the law. The chasm he had created now seemed completely unbridgeable. "What can I do?" he asked, more to himself than to the lawyer. The lawyer looked at him with a mixture of compassion and professionalism. "Legally, we can fight the restraining order if it's filed. But, Mr. Thompson, if I may be so bold, I think what you need is not a legal approach but a personal one." Jack looked up, intrigued. "A lot of time has passed," the lawyer continued. "The wounds are deep. If you really want to reconnect with your family, you'll need patience, humility, and above all, consistency. You can't just show up after years of absence and expect everything to go back to normal." The lawyer's words resonated with Jack. For the first time, in years, he allowed himself to see the situation not from his perspective but from his family's. How would Ethan feel, seeing his father suddenly appear and cause a scene? How would Lily feel, seeing the father she barely remembered fighting with the man who had probably been a father figure to her in recent years? And Emily Jack closed his eyes, remembering the look of disappointment and disgust on her face. She had moved on. She had rebuilt her life. What right did he have to barge in like that? "What do you suggest I do?" Jack asked, feeling completely lost for the first time in years. The lawyer looked him directly in the eyes. "Start over, Mr. Thompson. Not as the successful businessman, not as the wounded ex-husband, but as a father who wants to make amends for his mistakes. It will be a long and difficult road, but if you truly love your family, it's worth trying." Jack nodded slowly, the words sinking into his consciousness. He knew the lawyer was right. He couldn't undo the past, but perhaps, just perhaps, he could build a different future. As the lawyer stood to leave, Jack stopped him with a final question. "Do you think it's too late? Do you think they'll ever be able to forgive me?" The lawyer looked at him with a mixture of understanding and challenge. "That, Mr. Thompson, depends entirely on you, and how willing you are to do the hard work necessary to earn that forgiveness." With those words, the lawyer left, leaving Jack alone with his thoughts and the weight of years of wrong decisions. As he waited to be released, Jack made a decision. It wouldn't be easy, and it certainly wouldn't be quick, but he was going to do everything possible to reconnect with his family, no longer for his ego, not for his guilt, but for the genuine love he felt for them, a love he had buried under years of ambition and pride. The path would be long and full of obstacles, but for the first time in years, Jack Thompson felt a real purpose in his life, and as the sun began to peek through the airport windows, marking the beginning of a new day, Jack promised himself that this time he wouldn't fail his family. This time he would fight for what really mattered. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of the hotel room where Jack Thompson was temporarily staying. A week had passed since the incident at the airport, and each day since then had been an emotional roller coaster. Jack got up from the bed, feeling the weight of his past and recent decisions on his shoulders. He approached the window and looked out at the city he once called home. How had things changed in his absence? How had his children, his ex-wife, changed? The sound of his phone pulled him from his thoughts. It was his assistant in California. "Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry to bother you, but the board of directors is asking for you. They need an answer about the new project in Asia." Jack sighed. "Tell them I need more time. I have personal matters to attend to here." There was an uncomfortable silence on the other end of the line. "Sir, with all due respect, they've been waiting for this decision for weeks. If we don't respond soon, we could lose the opportunity." In the past, these words would have sent Jack running back to the office, ready to immerse himself in work and forget everything else. But now something had changed. "The opportunity can wait," he said firmly. "My family can't." He hung up the phone, surprised by his own words. For the first time in years, work wasn't his number one priority. As he prepared to face the day, Jack reflected on the events of the past week. After being released from the airport, he had tried to contact Emily, but she had refused to speak to him. Through her lawyer, he had received a clear message: stay away from her and the children. The rejection hurt, but Jack knew he deserved it. He couldn't expect 6 years of absence to be erased with a simple apology. Determined to begin his path to redemption, Jack left the hotel and headed to a nearby park. He knew that Ethan used to practice soccer there on Saturday mornings. He didn't plan to approach, he just wanted to see him from afar, see what his son had become. When he arrived at the park, he saw him immediately. Ethan, now 12 years old, ran across the field with an agility and determination that made Jack's heart swell with pride. But he also noticed something else, the hardness in his son's eyes, a seriousness that didn't correspond to a child his age. From the stands, Jack watched the game, feeling more and more the weight of missed moments. Goals scored, falls, victories and defeats that he hadn't witnessed. How many times had Ethan looked for his father in the stands after scoring a goal, only to remember that he was no longer there? At the end of the game, Jack saw Ryan approach Ethan, patting him on the back and offering him a water bottle. The familiarity and affection between them was evident, and Jack felt a pang of jealousy and guilt. He was so absorbed in the scene that he didn't notice the person approaching from behind. "What are you doing here, Jack?" He turned, surprised to find himself face to face with Emily. Her eyes, once full of love, now looked at him with a mixture of anger and weariness. I just wanted to see him," Jack replied, suddenly feeling like an intruder. "I wasn't going to. Approach, I promise." Emily crossed her arms, her posture defensive. "And you think that makes it better, stalking your own son from the shadows?" The words hit Jack hard. Seen from that perspective, his actions seemed even more pathetic. "I'm sorry, Emily. I wasn't thinking, You just thought about yourself, as always," Emily interrupted. "Do you have any idea what you did to Ethan with your little spectacle at the airport? He's been having trouble at school since then. His teacher called saying he's become aggressive with other children." Jack felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. Not only had he not helped, but he had made things worse for his son. "Emily, please," Jack pleaded. "Let me talk to him. Let me explain." "Explain what, Jack?" Emily's voice was sharp. "That his father preferred money and success to his family, that after 6 years of absence, the first thing you do is cause a scene and fight with the man who has been more of a father to him than you." Each word was like a dagger, but Jack knew he deserved them all. "I know I made mistakes, terrible mistakes," he said, his voice broken with emotion. "But I'm here now. I want to make things right. Please, Emily, give me a chance." Emily looked at him for a long moment, as if assessing the sincerity of his words. Finally, she sighed. "It's not that simple, Jack. You can't disappear for years and expect us to welcome you with open arms. Ethan is hurt, confused, and Lily, she barely remembers you." The words hurt, but Jack knew they were true. "I know," he said softly. "I don't expect things to go back to how they were before. I just want the opportunity to be in their lives somehow." Emily seemed to consider his words. "Look, Jack, I can't make this decision for them. If Ethan and Lily want to see you, I won't oppose it, but it will be on my terms, and only if you promise not to disappear again. I can't let you hurt them again." Jack nodded, feeling a small spark of hope. "I promise, Emily. I'll do whatever it takes." "Good," said Emily, her voice still cautious. "I'll talk to the kids. If they agree, we can arrange a supervised visit next week." Before Jack could respond, they saw Ethan and Ryan approaching. Ethan's face darkened when he saw his father. "Mom, what's he doing here?" Ethan asked, his voice a mixture of confusion and anger. Emily put a comforting hand on her son's shoulder. "Your father wanted to see you play, honey. We were talking about the possibility of you seeing him next week if you want." Ethan looked at Jack with an intensity that made the man's heart shrink. "Why would I want to see him? He abandoned us, remember?" Ryan, sensing the tension, intervened. "Ethan, I know you're angry, but maybe you should listen to what your father has to say." Jack looked at Ryan with surprise and gratitude. Despite their altercation at the airport, the man was trying to help. Ethan, however, wasn't convinced. "I don't care what he has to say. I don't need him. I have you, Ryan." With those words, Ethan walked away, leaving the adults in an uncomfortable silence. Jack felt his heart breaking. His son's rejection was painful but understandable. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. Not knowing what else to say, Emily looked at him with a mixture of compassion and resignation. "Give him time, Jack. You can't expect years of absence to be erased in an instant." Ryan nodded, adding, "Ethan is a good kid. He's hurt, but he also has a big heart. Don't give up on him." Jack looked at Ryan, feeling a mixture of gratitude and shame for his earlier behavior. "Thank you," he said sincerely, "and I'm sorry about the airport. I shouldn't have reacted like that." Ryan nodded, accepting the apology. "We all make mistakes. The important thing is how we make amends." As they watched Ethan walk away, Jack realized that the path to reconciliation would be much harder than he had imagined, but he was determined not to give up. "Emily," he said, turning to his ex-wife, "I know I have no right to ask for anything, But could you at least consider letting me see Lily? I understand if Ethan doesn't want to see me, but maybe... Emily interrupted him with a gesture. I'll talk to both of them, Jack. But I can't promise anything. And if they agree to see you, it will be under my conditions, understood? Jack nodded, grateful for even this small opportunity. Of course, whatever it takes. As Emily and Ryan walked away to catch up with Ethan, Jack was left alone in the park watching the family that was once his walk away. The task ahead seemed monumental, but for the first time in years, he felt he was on the right path. He took out his phone and dialed a number. Hello? Yes, this is Jack Thompson. I need to cancel. My commitments for the next few weeks. I have urgent personal matters to attend to here. As he hung up, Jack looked one last time toward where Ethan had disappeared. This time, he murmured to himself, I'm not going to fail them. Meanwhile, at Emily's house, Lily was sitting in her room, drawing at 10 years old. She was a creative and sensitive girl with a surprising ability to capture the emotions of those around her. Emily entered the room, observing her daughter with a mixture of love and concern. What are you drawing, sweetie? Lily looked up, her big brown eyes full of wisdom beyond her years. Our family, she replied, showing the drawing to her mother. Emily took the paper, feeling a lump in her throat. In the drawing, there were 5 figures: Emily, Ethan, Lily, Ryan, and Jack, the latter drawn a bit apart from the rest. It's beautiful, my love, said Emily, sitting next to her daughter. But why did you draw your dad so far away? Lily shrugged. Because that's how it is, isn't it? He's far away. Emily hugged her daughter, feeling the weight of the situation. Lily, there's something I need to ask you. Your dad, he wants to see you. What do you think about that? The girl remained silent for a moment, her small hands nervously playing with a pencil. Why does he want to see us now? Didn't he love us before? Emily's heart broke hearing the question. Oh, sweetie, it's not that simple. Your dad, he made mistakes, big mistakes. But that doesn't mean he doesn't love you. Lily looked at her mother, her eyes full of confusion and hope. Do you think he'll stay this time? Emily sighed, not knowing how to respond. I don't know, my love. But if you want to see him, we can arrange a visit. Ryan and I will be there the whole time. Lily nodded slowly. I think I'd like to see him, but I'm scared, Mom. Emily hugged her daughter tightly. I know, sweetie. And it's okay to be scared. I'll be with you every step of the way, I promise. As mother and daughter hugged, Emily couldn't help but think about the challenges that lay ahead. Ethan's reaction in the park, Lily's apparent willingness to see her father, Ryan's constant and comforting presence, everything mixed in a whirlwind of emotions and complications. She knew the coming days would be difficult. Jack's reappearance had stirred waters that had remained calm for years. But as she held her daughter, Emily promised herself that no matter what happened, she would protect her children and do what was best for them. The sound of the front door opening indicated that Ethan and Ryan had arrived. Emily kissed Lily's forehead and stood up. Come on, sweetie, it's time for dinner, and afterwards I think we all need to have a long family conversation. Lily took her mother's hand, and together they left the room, ready to face the challenges that awaited them as the united family they were. The tension was palpable in Emily's living room. Jack, sitting uncomfortably on the edge of the sofa, nervously glanced towards the closed door where Emily had disappeared moments before to fetch the children. Ryan, standing by the window, maintained a silent vigil, his presence a mixture of support and warning. The silence was broken by the sound of approaching footsteps. Jack straightened up, his heart pounding in his chest. The door opened and Emily entered, closely followed by Lily. Ethan, however, was nowhere to be seen. Where's Ethan? Jack asked, unable to hide his disappointment. Emily exchanged a look with Ryan before responding, Ethan needs more time. He doesn't feel ready for this meeting. Jack nodded, trying to hide the pain he felt. He focused on Lily, who was looking at him with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Hello, Lily, he said softly with a trembling smile. You've grown so much. Lily approached, slowly, her eyes never leaving her father's. Hi, she replied quietly. There was an awkward moment of silence before Jack spoke again. "I brought you something," he said, reaching for a bag he had brought with him. He pulled out a beautiful art book with pages full of colorful illustrations. "I remember you always liked to draw." Lily's eyes lit up when she saw the book. She looked at her mother, as if asking for permission, and when Emily nodded, she carefully took the gift. "Thank you," she said, a small smile forming on her lips. Encouraged by this small victory, Jack continued, "I'd love to see some of your drawings if you want to show me." Lily seemed to hesitate for a moment, but then nodded. "I have some in my room. Can I go get them, Mum?" Emily nodded, and Lily quickly left the room. Once they were alone, Jack turned to Emily and Ryan. "Thank you for allowing this," he said sincerely. Emily looked at him with a mixture of caution and resignation. "It's for the kids' sake, Jack. But remember, this doesn't erase the last 6 years." Jack nodded solemnly. "I know, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn their trust again." Ryan, who had remained silent. "Until now," spoke Jack, "I need you to understand something. These kids, they're my family too. I've been there for them for years. I'm not going to disappear just because you've decided to come back." Ryan's words, though spoken without malice, hit Jack like a punch to the stomach. It was a painful reminder of everything he had missed. "I understand," Jack responded, his voice tense, "and thank you for being there when I wasn't." The moment was interrupted by Lily's return, carrying a folder full of drawings. She sat next to Jack and began to show him her creations, explaining each, one with the enthusiasm typical of a girl her age. Jack listened attentively, marveling at his daughter's talent and painfully aware of how much he had missed. Each drawing was a window into a moment of Lily's life that he hadn't witnessed. Her first day of school, family vacations, birthdays. In the middle of Lily's explanation about a particularly colorful drawing, the living room door burst open. Ethan entered, his face a mask of barely contained anger. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice trembling with emotion. Everyone startled at the sudden interruption. Emily was the first to react. "Ethan, honey, I thought you had decided not to join us." "I changed my mind," Ethan replied, his eyes fixed on Jack. "I wanted to see for myself if it was true that he had come back." Jack slowly stood up, unsure how to proceed. "Ethan, No," Ethan interrupted him, his voice laden with emotion. "I don't want to hear your excuses. Do you think you can just show up after all these years and act like nothing happened? Do you think a stupid gift is going to fix everything?" Lily, frightened by her brother's outburst, moved closer to Ryan, who protectively embraced her. Jack took a step towards his son, with his hands extended in a pleading gesture. "Ethan, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. I made terrible mistakes." "Mistakes!" Ethan exclaimed, his voice breaking. "You call abandoning your family a mistake? Do you know how many nights I cried, wondering why my dad didn't want me? Do you have any idea what it feels like to see all my friends with their dads at soccer games while mine couldn't even bother to call?" Every word was like a dagger for Jack. He knew he had hurt his son, but facing the consequences of his actions head-on was devastating. "I'm sorry," Jack said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. If I could go back—" "But you can't," Ethan shouted. "You can't go back and you can't fix this. I hate you. I wish you had never come back." With those words, Ethan ran out of the room, the sound of his footsteps echoing through the house, followed by the loud slam of a door. The silence that followed was deafening. Lily was crying silently in Ryan's arms, while Emily looked at Jack with a mixture of pity and resignation. Jack collapsed onto the sofa, defeated. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, more to himself than to the others. "I've ruined everything, haven't I?" Emily approached him, her expression softening slightly. "Jack, you have to understand this isn't going to be easy. Ethan has been carrying a lot of pain and resentment for years. You can't expect it to disappear overnight." Ryan, still holding Lily, added, "Give him time, and above all, be consistent. If you really want to be part of their lives, you'll have to show them that this time you'll stay no matter what." Jack nodded, wiping away a tear that had escaped without him noticing. He looked at Lily, who was watching him with a mixture of fear and sadness. "I'm sorry, Princess, I didn't want you to see this." Lily gently let go of Ryan and approached her. "Father." To everyone's surprise, she hugged him. "It's okay, Dad," she said softly. "Ethan is angry now, but I know deep down he misses you as much as I do." Lily's words were like a balm for Jack's wounded heart. He hugged her tightly, promising himself that this time, no matter what, he wouldn't let them down. Emily, seeing the scene, felt a mixture of emotions. On one hand, she feared that Jack would hurt the children again. On the other, a small part of her wanted to believe that this time would be different. "I think that's enough for today," she said softly. "Jack, maybe you should go. We need time to process all this." Jack nodded, gently releasing Lily. "Of course, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I promise I'll do things right this time." As he prepared to leave, Jack looked towards the stairs, hoping against all hope that Ethan would come down. But the house remained silent. Ryan accompanied him to the door. Before Jack left, Ryan stopped him with a hand on his shoulder. "Look, I know this is difficult for you, but for the sake of the kids, I sincerely hope that this time you keep your promise." Jack looked at Ryan, seeing in him not a rival, but a man who genuinely cared for his children. "I will," he promised. "No matter how long it takes, I won't give up on them." With those words, Jack left the house, leaving behind a shocked and confused family. That night, as Jack lay awake in his hotel room, he couldn't stop thinking about the day's events. Ethan's rejection hurt deeply, but Lily's hug gave him hope. His phone rang, pulling him from his thoughts. It was his assistant in California. "Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry to bother you, but the board of directors is insisting on an answer about the project in Asia. They say if we don't make a decision soon, we'll lose the opportunity." Jack closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his corporate responsibilities. For a moment, the temptation to immerse himself in work, to escape from the emotional pain, was strong. But then he remembered the promise he had made to himself and his family. "Tell them I'm going to need more time," he responded firmly, "and schedule a video conference for tomorrow. I have some important announcements to make." "But sir, the project can wait," Jack interrupted. "There are more important things at stake here." After hanging up, Jack got up and approached the window. Looking out at the illuminated city, he made a decision. He was going to make radical changes in his life, changes that would allow him to be present for his children without completely neglecting his business responsibilities. It wouldn't be easy. He knew he would face resistance, both at work and in his attempt to reconnect with his family. But for the first time in years, Jack Thompson felt he was making the right decision. Meanwhile, at Emily's house, another important conversation was taking place. Emily and Ryan were sitting in the kitchen, talking in low voices so as not to wake the children. "Do you think we did the right thing by allowing Jack to see them?" Emily asked, her voice laden with concern. Ryan sighed, taking Emily's hand in his. "Honestly, I don't know. But I think the kids needed this. They needed to face their father, for better or worse." Emily nodded slowly. "I'm worried about Ethan. I've never seen him so angry." "It's understandable," Ryan replied. "He's been holding in those emotions for years. Maybe this is the beginning of a healing process for him." "What if Jack leaves again?" Emily asked, expressing her greatest fear. "I can't bear the thought of him hurting them again." Ryan looked her in the eyes, his expression serious but full of love. "If that happens, we'll be here for them like we've always been. No matter what happens, Emily, we're a family. Nothing will change that." Emily leaned towards Ryan, finding comfort in his embrace as they remained like this in silence. Both wondered what the future held for them and how Jack's reappearance would affect the family dynamic they had built with so much effort. In his room, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The day's emotions had left him exhausted, but his mind wouldn't stop racing. Part of him regretted exploding like that in front of his father, but another part felt that every word he had said was true. Next to his bed, in a drawer he rarely opened, there was an old crumpled photo. It was of him and his father, taken on his 6th birthday, the last one they had spent together. In the photo, they were both smiling, oblivious to the future that awaited them. With a sigh, Ethan turned over, trying to fall asleep, As he sank into an uneasy sleep, one question persisted in his mind. Could he ever forgive his father? The sun was barely peeking over the horizon when Jack Thompson sat in front of his laptop in the hotel room. He took a deep breath, preparing for the video conference that was about to change the course of his professional and, he hoped, personal life. The faces of the board members appeared on the screen, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and concern. Jack had never postponed important decisions before, and his recent behavior had them puzzled. "Good morning, everyone," Jack began, his voice firm despite the nerves he felt. "I appreciate your patience. These days I know you've been waiting for a decision on the Asia project, but before we get to that, I have an important announcement to make." He paused, observing the reactions of those present. Some looked intrigued, others impatient. "I've decided to step down as active CEO of the company," Jack announced, causing a wave of murmurs and expressions of surprise. "I'll maintain my position on the board, but it's time for me to step aside from day-to-day operations." The questions came quickly. "Why now, Jack? What will happen to ongoing projects? Who will take your place?" Jack raised a hand, asking for silence. "I understand your concern. I've spent the last few days preparing a detailed transition plan. Carlos Mendoza, our current COO, will assume the role of interim CEO while we search for a permanent replacement." As Jack continued explaining the details of his decision and how it would affect the company, he couldn't help but feel a mixture of relief and anxiety. On one hand, he was leaving behind the work to which he had dedicated his life for the past few years. On the other, he was taking the first real step towards reconciliation with his family. After almost 2 hours of discussion, questions, and planning, the video conference came to an end. Jack closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair, exhausted but determined. His phone rang almost immediately. It was Carlos Mendoza. "Jack, are you sure about this?" Carlos asked, his voice a mixture of concern and contained excitement. "More sure than ever, Carlos," Jack replied. "I trust you to take the company forward, and don't worry, I won't disappear completely. I'll be available for consultations and important decisions." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Thank you for the trust, Jack. But tell me, what are you going to do now?" Jack looked out the window, towards the city he once called home. "I'm going to try to recover what really matters, Carlos. My family." Meanwhile, at Emily's house, breakfast was proceeding in tense silence. Ethan was picking at his food without much enthusiasm, while Lily looked from her mother to Ryan, as if expecting one of them to say something to break the tension. Finally, Emily spoke. "Kids, I know yesterday was a difficult day. Do you want to talk about it?" Ethan dropped his fork with a metallic clang. "What is there to talk about? He's back, so what? It doesn't change anything." "Ethan," Ryan intervened gently, "I understand you're angry, but maybe you should give your father a chance to explain himself." "Are you on his side now too?" Ethan snapped, standing up from the table. "Great. Everyone wants the great Jack Thompson back in our lives. Well, I don't." Before anyone could stop him, Ethan ran out of the kitchen. The sound of his bedroom door slamming shut echoed throughout the house. Lily, with tears in her eyes, looked at her mother. "Why is Ethan so angry, Mum? Shouldn't we be happy that Dad is back?" Emily hugged her daughter, searching for the right words. "Sweetie, it's complicated. Your brother has a lot of pent-up feelings, and he needs time to process them. It's not so easy to forgive when someone has hurt you." Ryan approached, putting a comforting hand on Lily's shoulder. "Sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who can hurt us the most, but that doesn't mean we can't fix things with time and proper effort." Lily nodded slowly, although it was evident she was still trying to understand the situation. "Can I go talk to Ethan?" Emily and Ryan exchanged a look. "Sure, honey," Emily said. "Just be patient with him, okay?" As Lily went up the stairs, Emily turned to Ryan, worry evident on her face. "Do you think we did the right thing by allowing Jack back into their lives like this?" Ryan hugged her, gently kissing her forehead. "There's no manual for these situations, Emily. We're doing the best we can. The important thing is that we're here for the kids no matter what happens." Jack was walking through the park near Emily's house, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. He had made a drastic decision in leaving his position as CEO, and now he faced the reality of what that meant. As he walked, he noticed a familiar figure sitting on a nearby bench. It was Ethan, alone, absent-mindedly kicking a soccer ball. Jack stopped, unsure how to proceed. Should he approach? Give him space. Before he could decide, Ethan looked up and saw him. For a moment, father and son stared at each other, the tension palpable even at a distance. Finally, Jack decided to take the first step. "Hello, Ethan," he said softly, approaching cautiously. "May I sit?" Ethan shrugged, a gesture that Jack interpreted as a reluctant yes. He sat down, maintaining a respectful distance. "I'm sorry about yesterday," Jack began. "I didn't mean to cause so much pain." Ethan remained silent, his gaze fixed on the ball at his feet. "I know you probably don't want to listen to me," Jack continued, "but I want you to know that I've made some important decisions. I've left my job as CEO of the company." This caught Ethan's attention, who finally looked at his father. "What? Why?" Jack smiled sadly. "Because I realized I had lost sight of what really matters. You, your sister, your mother. You're more important than any business or amount of money." Ethan seemed to consider these words for a moment. "So what? Do you expect everything to go back to normal just because you quit your job?" "No, of course not," Jack replied. "I know I've made terrible mistakes, Ethan. Mistakes that have hurt the people I love the most. I don't expect you to forgive me immediately. I don't even know if you ever will. But I want you to know that I'm here now and I'll do everything possible to earn your trust again." There was a long silence. Ethan seemed to be struggling internally, wanting to believe his father, but afraid of being hurt again. "What if you leave again?" he finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. Jack's heart broke, hearing the fear in his son's voice. "I won't, Ethan, I promise. I know my promises don't mean much to you right now, but I'll show you with actions that this time is different." Ethan nodded slowly, still not, looking directly at his father. "I need time," he said finally. "I understand," Jack replied. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready." He stood up, willing to give his son the space he needed. But before leaving, Ethan spoke once more. "Dad," he said, his voice a mixture of vulnerability and challenge. "If you really want to prove you've changed, you'll have to do more than just say it." Jack nodded, feeling a spark of hope. "I know, son, and that's exactly what I intend to do." As Jack walked away, Ethan watched him. A storm of emotions inside. Part of him wanted to believe his father's words, longed for the relationship they never had. Another part, the hurt and distrustful part, warned him to protect himself. Only time would tell if Jack Thompson had really changed. That night at Emily's house, the family gathered for dinner. The atmosphere was less tense than at breakfast, but an undercurrent of unresolved emotions could still be felt. "Ethan," Emily began, noticing that her son seemed less agitated than before. "Is everything okay? You look different." Ethan played with his food for a moment before responding, "I saw Dad today in the park." Everyone at the table stopped, surprised by the revelation. "And what happened?" Lily asked, unable to contain her curiosity. Ethan shrugged. "We talked a little. He told me he left his job." Emily and Ryan exchanged looks of astonishment. "He left his job?" Emily repeated, incredulous. "Why would he do that?" "He said he wanted to prove that we'd changed," Ethan replied, his voice a mixture of confusion and caution. "That we were more important than his company." Silence fell over the table as everyone processed this information. Ryan was the first to speak. "That's a big step," he said, measuring his words. "How do you feel about it, Ethan?" Ethan remained thoughtful for a moment. "I don't know, part of me wants to believe him, but you're afraid of getting hurt again," Emily softly completed. Ethan nodded, grateful that his mother understood. "I think Dad is really trying," Lily chimed in. "Couldn't we give him a chance?" Everyone looked at the little girl, surprised by her maturity. Emily took her daughter's hand. "Honey, it's not that simple, but I appreciate that you want to give your father a chance." Ryan, feeling the need to lighten the mood, smiled. "Well, it seems we have a lot to think about. But for now, how about we finish dinner and then watch a movie together?" The suggestion was met with grateful nods. As the conversation drifted to lighter topics, each family member was immersed in their own thoughts. Emily wondered if Jack had really changed and how this would affect the family dynamic they had built with Ryan. Ryan, for his part, struggled with mixed feelings. On one hand, he wanted what was best for the kids, even if that meant Jack coming back into their lives. On the other, he couldn't help but feel a pang of fear at the possibility of losing his place in the family. Ethan alternated between hope and skepticism, wanting to believe in his father, but afraid to lower his guard. And Lily, in her innocence, simply hoped that her family could somehow be complete again. Meanwhile, in his hotel room, Jack looked out the window, reflecting on the day's events. He had taken the first step, but he knew the road ahead would be long and difficult. He took out his phone and, after a moment of hesitation, wrote a message. "Emily, I know it's a lot to ask, but I'd like to talk to you and Ryan. There are things I need to explain and plans I want to share. If you agree, I'd like to meet with you tomorrow. Please let me know if it's possible, Jack." He sent the message and waited, his heart beating fast. He knew this conversation could be a turning point in his attempt to reconnect with his family. He just hoped Emily and Ryan would be willing to listen to him. The coffee steamed in the cups on the table as Jack, Emily, and Ryan looked at each other in uncomfortable silence. They had agreed to meet at a small cafe in the city center, neutral ground for the conversation that was about to come. Jack was the first to break the silence. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," he said, his voice laden with sincerity. "I know it hasn't been easy for any of you." Emily nodded slightly while Ryan maintained a neutral expression. "What did you want to talk to us about, Jack?" Emily asked. Jack took a sip of his coffee, searching for the right words. "First, I want to apologize. To both of you, Emily. I failed you as a husband and as a father to our children. And Ryan, my behavior at the airport was inexcusable. You've been there for my family when I wasn't, and I owe you my gratitude, not my anger." Ryan seemed surprised by the apology, but nodded in acknowledgement. "I appreciate your words, Jack," Emily said cautiously. "But what has changed? Why now?" Jack took a deep breath. "I've made many mistakes in my life, but the biggest was thinking that success and money could replace love and presence. I was wrong, and I've paid the price with the loss of the most valuable thing I had, my family." He paused, looking at both of them. "I've resigned from my position as CEO. I want to be here, to be part of my children's lives. I know I can't erase the past, but I'm committed to doing things right from now on." Emily and Ryan exchanged looks of astonishment. "That's a big step, Jack," Ryan said. "But what does it mean exactly for the kids? For us?" Jack leaned forward, his expression serious. "I want to be part of their lives, but I understand that things have changed, Ryan. You've been a father figure to them, and I respect that I'm not here to replace you or to alter the dynamic you've built. I just want the opportunity to repair the damage I've caused and, if possible, build a new relationship with my children." Emily, who had been listening attentively, spoke. "Jack, I appreciate your sincerity, but have you thought about what this means in the long term? The kids need stability. They can't go through another disappointment." Jack nodded solemnly. "I understand completely. That's why I've taken concrete steps. I've bought a house here in the city. I plan to settle permanently, to be available for the kids on their terms and at their pace. I don't expect things to change overnight, but I'm committed to being present no matter how long it takes." Ryan, who had been silent, finally spoke. "Jack, I value your honesty and your intentions, but I need you to understand something. I love those kids as if they were my own. I'm not going to disappear from their lives. Nor would I expect you to," Jack responded sincerely. "In fact, I hope we can find a way to coexist peacefully for the sake of the children they love, you, Ryan, and it would be selfish of me to try to change that." Emily, moved by the maturity of the conversation, took both men's hands. "This won't be easy for any of us. There will be awkward moments and challenges, but if we're all willing to put the kids first, I think we can make it work." The three nodded, a silent agreement forming between them. "So what's the next step?" Ryan asked. "I think we should talk to the kids," Emily suggested. "Be honest with them about the situation and listen to their feelings and wishes." Jack agreed. "Absolutely. and I want them to know that I'm here to stay, but that I'll respect their boundaries and their time. With a plan in mind, the three finished their coffee, preparing for the challenge ahead of them. That afternoon, Ethan and Lily sat in the living room, confused by the presence of the three adults in front of them. Emily, Ryan, and Jack had decided to have an open and honest conversation with the children. "Kids," Emily began softly, "we've been talking about some changes that might occur in our family, and we wanted to discuss them with you." Ethan looked warily at his father. "What kind of changes?" Jack leaned forward, looking at his children with sincerity. "I've decided to move back to the city. I want to be part of your lives if you'll allow me. But I understand if you need time or if you're not ready." Lily, her eyes bright with emotion, was the first to react. "Really? Will you stay this time?" Jack nodded, holding back tears. "Yes, Princess, this time I'm staying." Ethan, however, remained skeptical. "And what about Ryan? Won't he live with us anymore?" Ryan quickly intervened. "No, Ethan, I'm not going anywhere. Your father and I have talked, and we both want what's best for you. That means we'll both be in your lives if that's what you want." Ethan seemed to process this information, his expression a mixture of confusion and caution. "How would that work?" Emily took the floor. "Well, honey, that's something we'll have to figure out together. But the important thing is that all the adults here love you and want what's best for you." "Will I be able to see Dad whenever I want?" Lily asked, her voice full of hope. Jack smiled gently. "That's the idea, my love. I'll be here, and you can see me as much as you want. But I'll also understand if there are times when you prefer to be alone with your mum and Ryan." Ethan, who had been silent, finally spoke. "And if it doesn't work? What if you leave again?" The pain in his son's voice pierced Jack's heart. He knelt in front of Ethan, looking him in the eyes. "Ethan, I know I've failed you before, and I understand your distrust. I can't change the past, but I promise you that I'll do everything in my power not to fail you again. I'll be here, day after day, showing you with actions that this time is different." Ethan looked at his father for a long moment, as if searching for the truth in his eyes. Finally, he nodded slightly. "Okay, but you'll have to prove it." "I will," Jack promised, "every day." Lily, excited, hugged her father Ethan, although more reserved, allowed Jack to put a hand on his shoulder. Emily and Ryan watched the scene with a mixture of emotions. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but seeing the children give this new dynamic a chance gave them hope. The following months were a period of adjustment for everyone. Jack kept his promise, settling in the city and making constant efforts to be part of his children's lives. At first, interactions were awkward and full of tension. Ethan especially kept his distance, watching his father cautiously. But little by little, with patience and perseverance, things began to change. Jack attended Ethan's soccer games, cheering from the stands alongside Emily and Ryan. At first, Ethan barely acknowledged his presence, but over time, he began to look for his father in the crowd. After scoring a goal with Lily, Jack found a connection through art. They spent entire afternoons drawing together, Jack marveling at his daughter's talent, and Lily, excited to share her passion with her father Ryan, showing great maturity, worked alongside Jack to create an atmosphere of cooperation instead of competition. The two men came to a mutual understanding, united by their love for the children. Emily, for her part, observed these changes with a mixture of relief and caution. Seeing her children reconnect with their father was gratifying, but it also brought to the surface complicated emotions about their shared past. One day, almost a year after Jack's return, the extended family gathered to celebrate Ethan's birthday. As the adults prepared the grill in the backyard, Ethan approached his father. "Dad," he said, his voice softer than usual, "I wanted to thank you." Jack looked at his son, surprised. "Thank me? For what, champ?" Ethan fidgeted with the soccer ball in his hands. "For staying. For being here. I know it hasn't been easy, but it means a lot to me." Jack felt his heart swell with emotion. He put a hand on his son's shoulder. "Ethan, you and your sister are the most important things in my life. I'm sorry it took me so long to realize that, but now that I know, there's nothing that can keep me away from you." Ethan nodded, a small smile forming on his lips. "I know, Dad, I know." From the terrace, Emily and Ryan watched the scene, smiling. "Who would have thought we'd get to this?" Emily commented, leaning on Ryan. Ryan gently kissed her forehead. "Life has surprising ways of working out. The important thing is that the kids are happy." Emily nodded. Looking around, Lily was drawing in a corner of the yard, occasionally looking up to smile at the adults. Ethan and Jack were now kicking the ball together, laughing. And by her side was Ryan, the man who had been her rock during the difficult years, and who now formed an integral part of this unconventional family. It wasn't the family she had imagined years ago, but somehow it was perfect in its imperfection. As the sun began to set, bathing the yard in golden hues, Emily couldn't help but feel a deep gratitude. They had been through a lot: pain, separation, anger, and distrust. But through all of that, they had found a path to forgiveness, understanding, and a new kind of family love. The aroma of meat on the grill filled the air, mixing with laughter and conversations. Jack called everyone to the table, and as they gathered, Emily looked around once more. This was her family now. Different, complicated, but united by love and commitment to making it work. And as Ethan blew out the candles on his cake, surrounded by the people who loved him most, Emily knew that despite all the challenges, they had found their happy ending. It wasn't the end of their story. Of course, it was just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with promises, challenges, and above all, love.